Ancient Bible text tells a story on the famous episode of the Exodus, when the army of the Egyptian Pharaoh was destroyed by the returning waters that Moses had parted, has long been considered to be a myth, but now there has been new discoveries that could change history and confirm that that episode on the Bible, in fact, it really happened. An underwater archaeologists team has discovered the remains of a large Egyptian army of the 14th century before Christ, at the bottom of the Gulf of Suez, about 5 kilometers from the modern city of Rosgaroup. The team was looking for the remains of ancient ships and artifacts related to the Stone Age and Bronze Age trade in the Red Sea area, when they came across a gigantic mass of human bones darkened by age. Scientists led by Professor Abdel Muhammad Gader and associated with the Faculty of Archaeology of the University of Cairo, have already recovered a total of more than 400 different skeletons, as well as hundreds of weapons and pieces of armor, also the remains of 2 cars of war, scattered in an area of approximately 200 square meters. They estimate that more than 5,000 bodies could be scattered over a wider area, suggesting that a large army has perished at the site. Many clues on the site have led Professor Gader and his team to conclude that the bodies could be linked to the famous Exodus episode. First, the old soldiers seem to have died on the mainland, as no traces of boats or boats have been found in the area. The positions of the bodies and the fact that they were stuck in a large amount of clay and rock, imply that they could have died in a mudslide or in a swell. The large number of corpses suggests that a large ancient army perished in the place, and the dramatic way in which they were killed, both seem to corroborate the biblical version of the Red Sea crossing, when the army of the Egyptian Pharaoh was destroyed by the waters returning that Moses I had separated. This new finding proves without a doubt that there was a large Egyptian army that was destroyed by the waters of the Red Sea during the reign of King Akhenaten. This amazing discovery provides undeniable scientific evidence that one of the most famous episodes of the Old Testament was based on a historical event. It brings a totally new perspective on a story that many historians have been considering for years as a work of fiction, and suggests that other issues such as the Egyptian plagues could have a historical basis. What they found strewn across the bottom of the Red Sea has shaken the religious and scientific community, says Rude. Cameras mounted on remote-controlled submarines revealed coral-encrusted chariot parts, horse, and human remains strewn like battlefield wreckage on the bottom of the Red Sea. Rude also explained giant pillars have been found on both sides of the crossing to mark the event. One was discovered eroded on the Egyptian shore by the late American archaeologist Ron Wyatt. Later, another was located on the Arabian side with the legible remains of ancient Paleo-Hebrew inscriptions. He says the words for Pharaoh, death, Egypt, King Solomon, and the sacred name of God, with the legible remains of ancient Paleo-Hebrew inscriptions. He says the words for Pharaoh, death, Egypt, King Solomon, and the sacred name of God, are all present on the second pillar. Much more research and many more recovery operations are expected on the site in the coming years, as Professor Gader and his team have already announced their desire to recover the rest of the bodies and artifacts, which has turned out to be one of the site's richest underwater archaeology ever discovered.
He opens the waters before them, and he bars our way with fire. Let us go from this place. Men cannot fight against a god.
Better to die in battle with a god than live in shame.
Better to serve the Egyptians than to die here.
Who shall withstand the power of God?
Shalom. Reporting live here from the Atlantic Broadcast Network. It's the boy set apart from the world. Thank you, Lord, for deliverance. And welcome all those that are in the truth and seeking to grow higher, progress. And basically, sometimes you forget the basic and the fundamentals. See what I'm saying? There's ballers in the game. You know what I'm saying? Just take the NBA or NFL. Some of the greatest players to ever play the game, some of the greatest people to ever do anything were masters at the fundamentals. So that's what we're going to do. Take it back to the fundamentals on something like this. Remember, if you remember the last one of the last videos that I did, it was talking about how it was about same people, different tribes. But at the end of it, Malcolm X makes an awesome point. And he tells you that when the Bible's talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, that's talking about America. He's correct. When the Bible talks about Egypt, that's talking about America. Okay? And if you know the Hebrews, that was the first captivity they served, was under the Egyptians, which today would be the modern day Sudan, people of Sudan, the Watutis, you know what I'm saying, were the original Egyptians. But that word, Egypt, is synonymous with bondage or slavery. So now that we know that the book of Genesis has the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, the book of Exodus has Moses and the Israelites being delivered out of Egypt, and that's in the second book of the Bible. That should already be clear and present proof of the existence of the Most High, and that this world is ran by omnipotent power that is unmatched, who can predict the future before it happens. These devils claim to predict the future, but they're playing mind games. They don't know, because if they knew, they wouldn't have hung Jesus from a cross. If they knew the future, if they really knew the future, they wouldn't do what they're doing to God's elect at this very moment. So let's go into the book of 2nd Ezra here in the Apocrypha. 2nd Ezra 15, and we'll start at verse 7. 2nd Ezra 15, verse 7 says, "Therefore, thus saith the Lord," I'm trying to read it fast, "I will hold my tongue no more as touching their wickedness, which they profanely committed, neither will I suffer them in the things which they wickedly exercise themselves. Behold, the innocent and the righteous blood crieth unto me, and the souls of the just complain continually." The souls of the just, the Israelites that have passed, God says their blood cried continually unto me. What happened when Abel was murdered by his brother Cain? He said, "Cain, what did you do? Your brother's blood has cried unto me from the ground." Okay? "And therefore, thus saith the Lord, I will surely avenge them," the Israelites, "and receive unto me all the innocent blood from among them. Behold, my people is led as a flock to the slaughter, and I will not suffer them now to dwell in the land of Egypt." Remember, I said Egypt is synonymous with bondage. Take note that the book of 2nd Ezra was written the Greek captivity. We were already been delivered. You know what I'm saying? By this time in the Bible, we had already been delivered chronologically. We had already been delivered from the land of Egypt. Moses already got us out. Okay? But he's saying Egypt again. You know what I'm saying? "I will not suffer them now to dwell in the land of Egypt. I will bring them with a mighty hand and stretched out arm, and smite Egypt with plagues as before, and will destroy all the land thereof." So God's clearly telling you right here that I will smite the land of Egypt as from before. Egypt's already destroyed at this time. Egypt is not what it was at the time of this Greek captivity, but now we know he's talking about in this day. Another precept to Egypt being America. It says here in Deuteronomy 28, "And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, by way whereof I spoke unto thee. Thou shalt see it no more again, and there ye shall be sold unto your enemy for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. No man's going to redeem you except for black Jesus when he comes back through that sky." Okay, we already know that we came here on slave ships. You know what I'm saying? It's already documented. So God's calling this place America, Egypt. So now we're going to go to Revelations, the book of Revelations 11 and verse 8. And it says, and their dead bodies shall lie in the streets of the great city, which is America, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified with the image. You know what I'm saying? The image of the beast is the white man being Jesus then. You know what I'm saying? The Italians, the Roman Catholic Church, took the image of Jesus and crucified him again. But notice, it calls this place Egypt and Sodom. Okay, so this is Sodom and Gomorrah. This is Egypt, America, Babylon the Great. There's plenty of names for this place. You know what I'm saying? This city that is decked with gold and silver. Okay, but just the precept to let you know that this is Egypt and we're going to be delivered again. Just like we were delivered from Egypt before, we're going to be delivered again. Hold your head to all the elect out there. I say the beginning is near. Shalom.
Sodom and Gomorrah. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, "Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters, who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city." Lot, his wife and daughters, all fled from the terrible destruction of Sodom. Likewise, as it was also in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Wicked men were punished by the Lord in a divine judgment of fire. The intense heat consumed the wicked cities and their inhabitants. But Lot's wife looked back toward her beloved Sodom, violating the angel's command, and was thus turned into a pillar of salt. Turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example of those who afterward would live ungodly. This is a visible example that is mentioned here. The Bible tells us the cities were in the plain of Jordan, which is the area surrounding the Dead Sea, and it was once a beautiful, lush area. At 1,300 feet below sea level, this is the lowest place on earth, a very hot and desolate region that was cursed by God because of the sins of the people. Flavius Josephus, the 1st century Jewish historian, tells us, "There are still the remainders of that divine fire, and the traces of the 5 cities are still to be seen." Popular thought has it that the cities were later covered by the waters of the Dead Sea, but if Josephus could see the cities in his day, then we should be able to view them also, as the water level has, if anything, receded since his time. Driving along the coastal highway of the Dead Sea in Israel, one can soon see peculiar formations that are of a lighter color than the surrounding terrain. These are the ashen cities, destroyed by the wrath of God. These cities were consumed by intense flames, a supernatural heat that was directed by the hand of God. Today there is ash that is of lighter color than the surrounding mountains and terrain. As mentioned in the Bible, this is a desolate area where nothing grows. Inspecting the formations closely, one can see structures containing man-made elements, such as 90-degree angles. Even though the buildings were consumed by the fire, the remaining ash in these cities is comprised of a heavier material due to the inclusion of brimstone or sulfur, and still retains some of the original shapes of man-made structures. This stunning structure stands out as a singular formation with 4 sides, surrounded by a deep moat. We move in closer to inspect the unusual features evident on the side of the formation. On the side of the structure, this swirling pattern is different from any type of sedimentary rock or soil that would normally contain horizontal, even layers. These swirling designs were also seen in other ashen formations in the cities. This is evidence of extreme heat, up to 6,000 degrees Fahrenheit, where thermal ionization occurs, when the electrons repel and attract, forming these unusual swirling designs. In Lot's day, this area was a swirling cauldron of death and destruction, rained down from the Lord in heaven. Strange anomalies can be seen here, such as these fragile layers of material which disintegrate when touched. The limestone buildings in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were totally transformed into ash by the consuming fire of the Lord. Evidence of this destruction is revealed in the white gypsum anomalies in the area, including unusual shapes of chalk-like material, which is not found in other parts of the country. Even layers of white and gray material can also be seen, comprising gypsum and ash. At the time of Elijah on Mount Carmel, the Lord sent down a superheated fire from heaven, consuming the stone altar and sacrifice, turning them into ashes. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt sacrifice, and the wood, and the stones, and the dust, and it licked up the water that was in the trench. We are also told, "For the Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God." When God unleashes a consuming fire, it will turn stone into ashes. A large section of gypsum has fallen down here. It clearly exhibits the alternating layers of white ash that is calcium sulfate, gray ash that is calcium carbonate. One can also find loose or powdery ash that is quite thick and has been deposited next to the formations. The ash is made up of calcium carbonate and calcium sulfate, which comes from the limestone buildings and the brimstone mixing together during the fire. In the formations themselves, some material can be gently raked off the surface with the slightest touch. Looking down the city streets, one can notice man-made shapes which are not found in nature. Here we see a building with square sides or 90-degree angles. From the opposite side, we can see the same symmetrical structure and man-made angles. We can see the remains of walls that extended outward at 90-degree angles from the main structure. Once again, further evidence of man-made construction. Here we can see square windows that are visible in the walls of the structures, which give us a view of the past. Scanning the city for signs of prior habitation, we can see in the foreground a tower of cylindrical design, positioned at the edge of the city. The remains have suffered greatly during 3,500 years of wind and rain erosion. Even still, there is the appearance here of streets and man-made structures. The whole land is brimstone, salt and burning. It is not sown, nor does it bear, nor does any grass grow there, like the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admah and Zeboim, which the Lord overthrew in his anger and his wrath. Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah, from the Lord out of the heavens. Brimstone. Our first sample was found here, having been washed down from a higher location. This is the heavenly marker left behind, which proves the sites to be the real Sodom and Gomorrah. Ron Wyatt was the original discoverer of these cities in 1989, and he now describes the brimstone found here.
Okay, we're down at Sodom and Gomorrah still. Right in front of you see some unusual looking spots on this, shall we say, layer of ash. It's not stone, it's ash. Now we'll move in for a close-up of this. And you can see that they're kind of circular shaped. places. Now what we have found, and we'll move in a little closer here, is that inside each of these is sulfur. That is in most of them. Now the ones that do not have sulfur in them, and this one we just took a bunch of sulfur out and put it in our specimen bag. But the ones that don't have sulfur have a very black center where they have where it's been very hot. So now we'll move in on this one where there is some sulfur still present, and back off just enough so you can see what we're up to here, and we'll go collect that sample in a bag.
Exploring the cities further, more brimstone was found of various shapes and sizes. Several samples had been washed down to areas below and were added to our growing collection. This brimstone is made of monoclinic, white sulfur that has been burned or cooked at a high temperature. It is quite different from natural sulfur that is formed in geothermal areas. Samples were taken to a lab for analysis. Each specimen was carefully separated and prepared for testing, with the outer portion cast aside. Next, the samples were dried and placed in a rock crusher. Then they were pressed onto a disc. Then they were loaded into a machine for the semi-quantitative X-ray analysis. Each sample was individually transported into the testing chamber for analysis. The results proved to be quite amazing. As the samples were found to be 98% pure sulfur, unlike any other sulfur found on Earth. This pure, cooked sulfur is the heavenly marker that was left behind to show the world that the Lord, without a doubt, destroyed these sinful cities at His command. Critics have said that the sulfur is from volcanic activity, but that type of rhombic sulfur is only 40% sulfur and is of a crystalline form, unlike the white, compacted monoclinic form that is found in the Ashen cities today.